The movie begins with footage of a scientist demonstrating the world's first successful teleportation device. The footage then cuts to a boy named Soichiro adopting a stray cat. Soichiro's an orphan who had recently lost both his parents and can be seen getting adopted by a man called Professor Kochi, who's a friend of Soichiro's father and an inventor. In the following years, Kochi taught Soichiro electronics, hoping that he would follow in his footsteps and become an inventor one day like him. However, tragedy struck once again when Kochi and his wife met with a plane accident and passed away. Man, Soichiro just can't catch a break. Kochi's daughter Riko is then taken away by her uncle Kazuto, leaving Soichiro alone once again. Fast forward to the present, March 1st, 1995. Soichiro can be seen developing a prototype of an artificial intelligence robot named A1 for the company FWE. Turns out Kochi had given half of his business to Soichiro and the other half to Kazuto after he passed. During this time, Soichiro managed to invent a robot that would help humans do household chores and run errands. Just then, Riko comes by the house and the two start hanging out. Riko notices a new personal project that Soichiro's working on and quickly realizes that he's working on her late father's project, where Kochi wanted to create robots that don't need any recharging using plasma battery technology. Just then the doorbell rings, and Rin, who's Kazuto's assistant, shows up. She starts handing him some documents to sign and fixes his hair. Their close relationship causes a jealous Riko to leave. Bro went from orphan to Riz God. As Soichiro looks through those documents, it's revealed that he's giving away a portion of his company shares to Rin, who's his girlfriend. After he signs it, Rin lands one on him. A few days later, on March 8th, Soichiro pays Kazuto a visit at work and discovers him in the middle of giving himself his diabetic shots. Soon, Rin, who's a new major shareholder of the company, shows up. Kazuto starts telling him about a new business strategy, which is to release the A1 robots as soon as possible. Soichiro raises his concerns and says that the A1 is not ready yet for the public. However, Kazuto goes on to inform him, saying that he'll not fund the A1 project anymore and would be selling the technology to another company in order to profit more money from the sale of the A1 robots. Soichiro's furious because he doesn't want to lose the rights to his own creation, but just then, Rin stops their argument and offers for everyone to cast a vote on whether to proceed with the new business strategy. As expected, Kazuto chooses to move forward with it, and Soichiro is against the idea. However, when it's time for Rin to vote, she surprises her boyfriend by agreeing to sell the A1 robot technology away. Soichiro realizes that he had been set up the entire time, and his relationship with Rin was all a scam. Kazuto then informs Soichiro that although he'll continue to be a shareholder, he'll lose all access and connections to the business and its properties. Soichiro quickly rushes back home, hoping to secure whatever of his creation he could before the company takes it away. However, when he gets back, all his precious inventions are gone. Later that day, Riko goes to see Soichiro and finds him crying and drunk. She soon learns about what happened to him and goes to hug him. She tells him that she'll always be by his side and soon confesses her love for him. However, Soichiro rejects her and calls her a kid. This breaks her heart and she leaves. A depressed Soichiro then notices an ad for cryogenic sleep and decides to go for it. My man's gonna regret this. At the facility, a staff member tells him that he's allowed to bring his cat for his 30-year sleep and passes him a will where he'll be giving away all his shares to Riko once she turns 20. He then brings him up for a checkup before his cryogenic sleep. However, the doctor dismisses his application as he realized he's been drinking. The doctor tells Soichiro to carefully think about his decision and asks him to go back home. After Soichiro sobers up, he realizes that running away from his problems isn't the solution and decides to not go for the cryogenic sleep. Elsewhere, Riko returns back home and accidentally overhears her uncle and Rin talking about stealing Soichiro's plasma battery project. She quickly tries to inform Soichiro about their scheme by calling him, but her call goes to voicemail. Kazuto sees this and questions her about the phone call. She lies and hurries away, claiming she's gonna find a friend. Kazuto realizes what's going on and chases after her, but when she reaches Soichiro's house, she finds his house empty and a car pulls up in front of her. At the same time, Soichiro goes to find Rin and tells her that he plans to expose everything she and Kazuto had done and demands for all his research and technology back. Fearing that the company's reputation will suffer, Rin offers to give him back full control. However, when Soichiro's guard is down, she injects him with a sleeping-inducing substance. Now at this moment, someone drives off with Soichiro's truck. Rin realizes that Soichiro isn't alone and demands to know who was with him, but he ends up passing out. She then finds Soichiro's application to his 30-year cryogenic sleep and comes up with an evil plan. When Soichiro wakes up, he finds himself in a sleep pod with Rin looking at him from the outside. Rin informs him that she had bribed the cryogenic sleep company to put him to sleep without his acknowledgement and freezes him up and leaves. Soichiro then wakes up in a doctor's office whom he's greeted by. The doctor informs him that 30 years have passed and he's now in the year 2025. Soichiro suddenly remembers his cat, Pete, and asks for him. The doctor summons an android instead, also called Pete, and it's clear that his cat didn't manage to travel with him to the future. Later that day, Soichiro learns that he has no assets or money to his name and only has Rico's name card. The next morning, Soichiro sneaks out of the facility and is shocked to see how much the world has changed. Pete manages to catch him up and together they board a taxi. In the taxi, Soichiro's shocked to see there's no driver and it's fully automatic. Pete then tells him that he's a defective robot which has its own thoughts and opinions, and he hopes that Soichiro can fix him since he's an inventor. But Soichiro tells him that his skills are 30 years backdated and wouldn't help him too much. Pete tells him that they can study the new technology together, and after Soichiro agrees, he brings him to find Rico. When they get there, they notice her apartment is unlocked and decide to go inside. After walking past that huge amount of trash in the house, Soichiro is shocked to find an older Rin instead of Rico. Turns out Rin was the one who left her name card at the facility and wanted to lure Soichiro to her. She explains that the company had been taken over after Kazushito passed away due to his diabetes, and after she went to jail for helping companies evade taxes. She then starts getting mad at Soichiro for giving away his shares to him. A confused Soichiro starts questioning who the man is and asks where Rico is, but Rin tells him that Rico had passed away when she went to look for him that night. Later, Soichiro goes to visit Rico's grave and promises to catch the man Rin was talking about and avenge Rico's passing. He's asking Pete for his help, and immediately they start their search. After some time, Pete informs Soichiro that he needs to recharge for 3 hours. Soichiro gets curious about his friend's technology and goes to check his battery. He finds out that Pete is running on the plasma battery, which he was working on before. He also finds out Pete's made by a company called Aladdin Industries. Later that day, Soichiro heads to the FWE headquarters. He goes to a robot at the counter and informs her that he's an inventor of the A1 technology and wishes to speak to the president of FWE. At first, she rejects his entry, but all of a sudden she receives an overwrite and proceeds to bring Soichiro to meet the president. He finally meets the president, Goda, who happens to be a fanboy of Soichiro. Bro's got a major boy crush going on here. Goda starts asking if Soichiro remembers him, but he doesn't recall. Goda tries to help him remember by reminding him that he had sold his plasma technology to Aladdin and that he used to visit his family restaurant to find Professor Toy, who was later arrested for stealing money from a university to fund his time machine project. Soichiro thinks that someone had been using his identity in the past as he doesn't remember anything. Goda then shows him the history of all the shareholders of the company, and Soichiro finds the name of the mystery man called Taro, who's the founder of Aladdin Industries. He also learns that Rico was the creator of the Pete robots. Soichiro then suddenly has an epiphany and figures out who's behind everything. The next morning, Soichiro and Pete head to Toy's old laboratory. A delighted Toy goes to hug and quickly brings him in, informing him that he's late. Toy reveals his time machine to him and asks him to go in. Pete stops him from entering, but Soichiro reveals that he's actually behind everything and that he was the one who asked Toy to build the machine. He tells Pete that the future they're in now is a rewritten one, and he has to go back to change it in order to save Rico. Toy sets the date to February 28, 1995, and transports Soichiro back. However, Pete gets worried about him and decides to jump into the time machine just before it goes back to the past. When Soichiro wakes up, he finds himself in the apartment of Taro. He informs him of the date and tells him that he still has all his assets and technology and is free to work in his home. Taro also tells him that he's been briefed by Pete about everything, so he's in safe hands. The next day, Soichiro goes to Gota's restaurant to find Toy so that he can fund his time machine project. Although shocked, Toy accepts the money and leaves. With phase 1 of his plan completed, Soichiro goes back to working on the plasma battery. As he's working, Taro happens to come by, and Soichiro decides to ask him for a favor. He asks him to expose Rin's tax evasion schemes and tells him to set up a company called Aladdin to buy over his technology with the shares he was given to him. He also asks for a final request in secret. On the day Soichiro lost all his technology and was put to sleep, future Soichiro asks Pete to stop the truck, which took his technology before, while he goes to the location where he was knocked out by Rin that night. After seeing himself knocked out, he takes the opportunity to save Pete the cat and drives off. He goes to find Rico and apologizes for what he said earlier. Robot Pete then arrives with the truck full of his technology, and Soichiro leaves Rico with him. He then speeds his car into his house and burns everything, leaving his house on fire. They head back to Taro's place and reveal everything to Rico. Soichiro's asking Rico to pretend that she had passed away in the fire and asks her to be Taro's daughter, concealing her identity so that she can be safe, fulfilling his final request with Taro. Soichiro also passes all his technology to Taro and asks him to build Aladdin. He says his goodbyes to Rico once again and tells her to leave her life and forget about him. Soichiro then heads to the facility again and goes into cryogenic sleep. In the next scene, Soichiro's woken up by a doctor 30 years later, with Robot Pete entering with Pete the cat. He tells him that Rico has grown up and managed to become an inventor like him and modified his technology further, creating the Pete robots. But she decided to go to sleep after 20 years so she can be the same age as him when she wakes up. Realizing this, Soichiro runs to find her, and the movie ends with the two holding hands. Thank you so much for watching. If you had a good time today, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you're not already with us for more awesome recaps.